Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Gene Crump,
Good
the show is
evening.
yours.
David, thank you. I'd like to welcome you to Beyond Black History Month. This is a new venture of ASALH. David, as the president, charged the Education Committee with coming up with a vehicle to educate the populace about Black history, because Black history doesn't occur in February. So we're doing something each month to highlight Blacks that have an impact and created history. Future topics are going to be determined, as we go forward. But we are going to call on our ASALH members to be presenters. We're calling on our members to take an active role in creating Beyond Black History Month. And it'll be exciting, and it's not challenging. It's going to be very informal. So we look forward to your participation. And to spur on your participation, the Education Committee will be calling all the members to see what they're interested in, what their experience is, and we'll set.
That's the audio.
Yeah.
Lost his audio, yeah.
Gene, we lost your audio.
Have you heard all that I said?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to repeat it.
Tonight's
Tonight's topic will be Black men and women in film and media. And our next topic should be Veterans of Color on May 20th. And with that, I'll turn it over to Linda.
Good evening. I have the honor of introducing this fantastic panel. And we're going to start with Judge Charles Williams, who's an alumni of Howard University in Washington, D.C. He earned his law degree from the University of Florida. He worked as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney in the Sarasota-Manatee area upon graduation from law school. I'm going to skip down a lot of his legal stuff because he's waving his hand saying, don't talk about that stuff. But when he's not involved in his judicial duties, he writes, directs, and produces documentary films. His film Through the Tunnel won Best Historical Documentary at the Miami International Film Festival. He's received the 2015 Sidney Poitier Family Award for his work in the film Newtown at 100 and for promoting diversity in films. He's on lots of committees. He's involved in lots. He mentors kids. He wants everybody to go ahead and move forward. Another illustrious person that we have on our panel is Paul Tolliver. And he has a long history as a volunteer in production, marketing, and fundraising with the Black and African American films and film festivals. He is an original founding member of Langston Hughes African American Film Festival in Seattle, Washington, and a current member of the organizing committee of the Visions of the Black Experience Film Festival in Sarasota. He also has a lot of involvement in many things that he's done, and he was one of the original members of Affirm, which is now called Array, which is an organization funded by Academy Award filmmaker Ava DuVernay and Black filmmakers, and it allows them to really have their work shown where they wouldn't usually have it shown, which puts them into consideration for the Academy Awards. And we know that this is that month where the Academy Awards occur, so this is a very timely topic we're talking about. We also have some students from Booker High. Lani McNair is one of them, and she's a sophomore at Booker High. And she is in the Film Visual Performing Arts Department. And she joined the film class about 2.5 years ago. But she's always been involved and interested in art forms that are essential for the film industry, such as creative writing, sketching, photography, performing, and music. And she's been doing this since she was in the 4th grade. She's no slacker, is she? Currently, she's working as the casting director and sound director on the Booker High most recent film project called The Last Rung on the Ladder. And she is extremely excited about a future in film, and she wants to become involved as she continues at Booker High. We also have Stiles Summerlin, who is a senior at Booker High, and he's developed a passion for television and movies at a very young age. He wanted to know how things were made and how they were written, and he's part of the Visual Performing Arts Film and Animation Department. He has several short films that have been in festivals like Talking Teddy and Cure of the Colors. He plans to attend the UCF in the summer, and he's majoring in film and pursuing directing and screenwriting. I'd like to now turn it over to Charles and Paul to start us off in this discussion about Black men and women in film and media. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Paul is unmuted, which is the term of the year 2021. Please unmute, Paul. So, you know, one of the things that I think all of us tonight have in common is that we love film. And the common characteristics that Paul and I have is we like to talk about the history of film and the impact of film. And so the time that we have set aside is basically to follow an arc line of Black cinema. And it's really great that the Oscars are only a couple of weeks away. This year, the favorites for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor are all films produced by Black people, and Black actors for the first time may win in all of those categories, in major categories. So we've come a long way. But obviously, and Paul and I'll talk about it, you know, when we start about the beginning of Blacks in cinema, it's an unfortunate history because the early representations of Blacks pretty much perpetrated the post-reconstructive narratives of Black people in this country. You know, we were portrayed as caricatures, subservient to whites. And so we were only in films pretty much to entertain and to perpetuate those stereotypes. And obviously, the first film that you talk about is D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which premiered in 1915. And we all know what that film was about. It basically was a film that celebrated white supremacy. It was the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. But there was also a political element to it in that it was screened by Woodrow Wilson at the White House. And I don't think it was a coincidence that Woodrow Wilson basically segregated Washington, D.C. when he became president, and was probably one of the more racist presidents that we've ever had. So the timeline really starts, I think, and Paul, you can jump in at any time. We had these series of films that basically perpetrated the stereotype of Black people. Birth of a Nation, of course, that was a film that basically celebrated the Klan and basically brought to life on the screen all of the stereotypes about what would happen if Black people were in charge. Then 1927, The Jazz Singer, and that was Al Jolson. Basically 75% of the film was him in blackface. And then, you know, we had films that starred Lincoln Perry, who's better known as Stepin Fetchit, in the 30s. Ironically, Stepin Fetchit or Lincoln Perry was the first Black actor to earn $1 million in Hollywood. And then, of course, we go to Gone with the Wind in 1939, where Hattie McDaniel won the first Oscar ever given to a Black person. So, you know, Paul, what are your ideas in terms of the legacy and perpetuation of these stereotypes and what these films portrayed in the early history of Black cinema?
Just listening to you talk, you know, at the same time, we were having some Black actors and filmmakers were starting to come up with our own films produced by ourselves. And around 1915, I think they hit the scene, and they were called race films. I think about 500 of those were made between the years 1915 and in the late 1940s. That's an important movement because of, while at the same time on the big screen, you know, they were portraying us as folks who were less than human. You know, a lot of folks said, Black folks said, we must do something about that. We have to start making our own movies that portray us as real living human beings that feel and act the same way as other people. So you had folks who a famous person like Oscar Micheaux. I guess he's one of the more famous of those filmmakers, but you had other people besides him who were doing that. And so one thing I want to point out, back to the Birth of a Nation, I found this interesting. Not only was it screened at the White House, it ran for about 10 years and made a ton of money. So it was a very popular film. That just surprised me that it had that type of demand and people really wanted to see that. So, but back to race films, this was our effort to go ahead and try to present our own film for our own people that showed us as real. Again, they went to the mid 40s and they stopped because of a lack of funding. I think in the 50s, folks, major filmmakers saw a potential market and they started funding films that featured us in the film, in the movies that had people like Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier, that started to attract the Black audience, and the kind of the race films kind of went, lost a lot of people. So we see this growth of the race, our actions to try to contradict the white racist films with our own race films, and they did last a long time, to the point where it caught the attention of folks because they saw that they could make some money. Not that they had great intentions to do well, but it progressed to that point where we moved from the racist to the race films, and then to the films that included us Black folks in some of the mainstream films, but still in a manner that was not totally portraying us as true full humans. So at that, you're moving into the late 40s into the early mid 50s now, and which brought a lot of new faces on the scene. A lot of people saying, here, how about how we portray you, from films in the 40s that some of you may have seen in your research, like Stormy Weather, Cabin in the Sky in 43. That set the stage for the films that came on the scene in the 50s. So
yeah, and one of the with progress also comes certain damage. With progress, when seeing that Hollywood was finally responding to making Black films of its own, just like when baseball integrated, it was pretty much the death knell for Black films and Black film companies. So, the Micheaux Film Corporation, the Lincoln Motion Picture Corporation, which was founded by Noble Johnson. Once Hollywood started to portray Blacks, even though they were the producers and directors of the films, it was pretty much the death knell for these. And obviously everybody knows about Cabin in the Sky and Stormy Weather. Interestingly enough, these were the films that they felt more comfortable producing, which were more musicals, and having certain actors which sort of passed their litmus test in terms of who they did not mind backing. And that's why you had people like Ethel Waters and Lena Horne and Louis Armstrong and Cabin in the Sky, Cap Calloway and the Nicholas Brothers and Stormy Weather. Certainly those
Right.
Hollywood studios felt very comfortable having those types of actors in their films in terms of backing them financially. So it was sort of the death knell for all Black produced films for a long time. But Hollywood was responding to that. And then we go into, I think, what we can call the civil rights era of Black cinema. So Paul, do you want to start there?
yeah, well, I just wanted, before we move right into this, I just forgot to say that I found very interesting in my reading is a comment about back to the race films. And they were just saying, and here's the comment which I thought, and it's important for what I want to say later on. It says, although these films were produced on a limited budget, the popularity of race movies gave birth to a counter cinema with its own stars, highly organized and tightly run distribution system, and a multitude of exhibition venues, including Black-owned movie houses like the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C., and the Madam C.J. Walker Theater in Indianapolis. In addition to these theaters, the films also were shown at Black churches, Black schools, segregated theaters, or at midnight or matinee showings in white theaters. I found that really interesting that we had this tight network back in the 50s, back in the 20s or 30s, where we took control of our own distribution, our own filmmaking, and we said, okay, if we can't get in your house, we will find a way to show these movies. I'm bringing it up because I'm going to come back to that later for the current era that we're in now. But that's the part that was killed, as the judge says, once the major studios started picking it up. And we lost steam then, but now I'll bring that up a little bit later. But the civil rights era that we now are into in terms of the 60s. Now you were talking about, here's when Sidney Poitier, Harold Barrett was a primary face in leading man back in that time. You know, he did Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Raisin in the Sun, The Defiant Ones. He actually got an Oscar for Lilies of the Field, but he was one person that the go-to person. The classic film he made in the Heat of the Night with Rod Steiger. Rod Steiger won Academy Award, but that's when mercy. That's when excuse me, that was Bob Marley. That's when he had a scene in there, which was kind of a moment in history when Rod Steiger looked at him and slapped him. And here's the black man. He didn't take it. He slapped Rod Steiger back. And that one moment in the history of film said these people will no longer take just how we are portrayed and how we will act in films from this point on. So that was a moment in history that I think that kind of turned a lot of the film in terms of the characters that were being portrayed. So, and that was a good time that took us into the next era after the civil rights movement.
Yeah, just to add on, it was certainly a good time to be Sidney Poitier because he had a string of films that basically, you know, you could say it was the Sidney Poitier era. And it started really in the late 50s with The Defiant Ones when Stanley Kramer directed him and Tony Curtis. That's when he sort of made his debut. But then he went on a run in the 60s with Raisin in the Sun, which was adapted from a play by Lorraine Hansberry, Lilies of the Field, where he wins the Academy Award for Best Actor. That was in 63. 1967, he does To Sir with Love. 1967 again, he does Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which really, literally, there were theaters in the South that did not show that film. And probably theaters in the North and Midwest and West also, who made a pointed decision that they were not about to show that film. And of course, everyone knows that film was about interracial marriage. And at the time in 1967, when that film debuted on the screen, it was still illegal in 17 states to have an interracial marriage. So that's how on the edge that Sidney Poitier was. And of course, the iconic scene that you talked about with Sidney Poitier in The Heat of the Night, 1967, directed by Norman Jewison. Just a footnote to that scene, it was asked, and it was the, I want to just call him the plantation owner who was slapped. It was asked by Sidney Poitier because that original scene didn't call for that, but they asked Sidney, how would a black person react if a white person just slapped him like that? And he said, I'd slap him back. And that's basically how that scene sort of made it into that picture. So we have this whole era of films where now Hollywood is starting to take more of a social stance and showing, I think for the first time, really strong black actors in film. So then we go to, I think, maybe my favorite era, and Paul, I know it's probably yours, and that's the emergence of films that I've sort of described as Black Pride films and Blaxploitation films starting in the 70s. So Paul, I'll let you touch on some of those films.
Well, it was a iconic one that really kind of people claim as the first film, Black exploitation by Sweetback by Melvin Van Peebles. Some of you who may not remember him know of his son, but that was one that a lot of us saw and said, here's a man who's challenged a system of white superiority and seems that they did not catch him. He's still out here running. But the other films, of course, the iconic one that still has playing today over and over, Shaft, and then now we've got Shaft's the son of Shaft, and I think they have the grandson of Shaft, just blue lighted, just green lighted. So, but you know, the Shaft movie, and then next, of course, Superfly, Gordon Parks' Superfly. Those were kind of the anti-hero movies. Got a lot of for the Superfly movie, who was alleged to be, maybe he was sold drugs, but he was kind of an anti-hero who actually stood up to the establishment. So you have a series of these movies of these anti-hero guys, but they are portraying a Black man as someone who is no longer subservient, who no longer will take what is viewed by the white establishment as a behavior that they find now unacceptable. So you got those, and then you got some of the interesting ones where people move from like playing drug lords or badass cops to some unique roles that were not usually played by Black Americans, especially by Black males. You got some of you do remember Cleavon Little in Blazing Saddles, Silver Streak, the Richard Pryor films. He played Silver Streak and 48 Hours, Eddie Murphy, Lethal Weapon, Danny Glover, where they played characters that were not usually played by Black males, but they, for the first time, law enforcement officers, sheriffs, police officers, Silver Streak. But the point was here, all of these were kind of buddy films. We didn't trust the Black man to carry a film by himself. But so we teamed him with another white actor just to see if they could help, that they think would help carry the box office. So that was their first, the major studios' first foray into films where you had a Black male actor playing a non-traditional role, but as yet, at this point, they did not trust him to bring the box office. So the next piece after that, Judge, you can bring into that,
Yeah,
at some point we make that move.
Yeah, and I just want to circle back a little bit to the early blaxploitation movies. When you talk about Sweet Sweetback, which was directed by Melvin Van Peebles, and Shaft, which was directed by Garden Parks Sr., and Superfly, directed by Garden Parks Jr. I think what's significant about those films, it's a reemergence of Black directors, right? So although, there was this 30 or 40 year period when Blacks were being portrayed in films, even though people criticized the blaxploitation films, it did allow Black directors to really sort of put their art out there. And so I thought that was very significant. And although the buddy pictures that we talked about, Blazing Saddles, Silver Streak, 48 Hours, Lethal Weapon, it made stars out of Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy in terms of actors. I believe at one point Eddie Murphy was the #1 actor in Hollywood. That just goes to show the drawing power. And eventually he was able to do films on his own. But then, and I'm going to turn this over to you, Paul, because you know a lot more about it. We start now to begin to recognize and produce other young Black filmmakers. And so we go into the era of Spike Lee and Robert Townsend, Julie Dash, and John Singleton. So Hollywood's now beginning to recognize and produce some of these young Black filmmakers. So with the time that we have, Paul, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I like that. We kind of, just to let everybody know, we're kind of working quickly so that we can bring in Melania and Styles so that they have time to listen, because I really want to hear them too. Yes, at this point, we do have not only the young directors and the young filmmakers themselves saying, let us do our thing. One that I really like is a young man named Robert Townsend, who made the film Hollywood Shuffle. I think was that in 82, in that era.
87.
87. And he financed that film himself. out of his own credit cards. I think he spent over 6 figures making this film. But what was special about that, it was a movie within a movie. It was a film about an actor who wanted to prove he could play characters other than gangsters, pimps, thugs. And he kept going to different studios and kept getting rejected. So he showed, the film was about how he did that, about his real life actions. And the film was about that, himself, about the actor within the film, how he struggled to show ultimately that he could play roles, including Shakespeare, for instance. And then you got the others who are like Spike Lee, who actually came out really strong in the, now I'm going to say Spike came out with She's Got a Habit. What year was that, Judge?
That was 86.
86. And from that point on, he set the stage for a lot of the other filmmakers who were coming after him. Of course, my favorite is, I think in the introduction, we talked about the current Ava DuVernay, who 10 years ago, this is 21, yeah, in 2010, she started, young lady who was working in the film industry in promotion PR, and said to herself, I can make films, I can direct films, I can do this. So she set out to do this, to start becoming a filmmaker herself, as opposed to just doing PR for major studios. Her first film was a documentary, Millennia and Styles, about hip hop, a hip hop club in Los Angeles, and to show that. And then I know she started taking that to film festivals, that documentary. And then she made her own narrative, her first full feature film about a woman. I'm trying to remember the name. If I can, Judge, you're gonna have to help me here, but that was about a woman who had cancer, that Gene Siskel himself said this was a strong movie. It didn't matter what color it was, but that was, you got folks who remember that. There goes my mind.
Somebody will come on and remind us of that.
I know. But yeah, but Ava DuVernay is special to me. And the reason is, as we go back to the race films where they had this tight network, she started an organization called African American Film Releasing Movement, where she said, listen, if we cannot get our films in these mainstream movie theaters, we're gonna have to take it into our own hands. She went around the country talking to people who had Black film festivals and said, let's form this network where we can show our own films to our own people. And she knew, she pulled together us in Seattle, Washington, DC, Atlanta, Georgia, definitely 2 film festivals in Los Angeles, Miami, and New York, and Gary, Indiana, where at that time they had major Black film festivals. We all band together and we took the films that she had, that her group helped release, and we all showed them in our festivals. She was savvy enough to know how to get them in position to be qualified for Academy Awards. So that also helped us make that move. So she, using that model from the era of race films, went back to that, coupled with some of the more well-off actors and entertainers of today who were well-financed. So she now started this movement. It is now called Array, and instead of Affirm, but that is still very active and very strong today in terms of producing Black films that are now being accepted in the mainstream world of filmmaking. So that kind of takes us today. She's a very strong player. A lot of you know Ava DuVernay from her major films, Selma, 13, the documentary 13 about the Central Park 5. She also, a lot of you may know her as the producer and the one who actually does Queen Sugar on Oprah. That's her work as well. So she's very active today. She's still kicking butt, just named as part of the, I think it's the Cannes Film Festival. team that judges the film. So she's very active, one of my heroes. And so takes us to where we are today. And I know, Judge, you can pick up too.
Yeah, and you know, and we're going to end with this, and then we'll turn it over to Milani and Styles, because really, you know, you can draw a line from, you know, those first films all the way to what I think is sort of almost the golden era now for Black film, starting with Barry Jenkinson in Moonlight and Jordan Peele in Get Out, and recently, of course, Regina King in One Night in Miami. So now we are here, come a long way, but now we have the situation where we not only are starring in films, we're directing these films and we're producing them. So we've come a long way from Gone with the Wind and those films. So at this time, we do have a new generation of filmmakers. We have Melania McNair and Styles Summerlin. Gene, I don't know if you want to segue into them or just have Melania and Styles start talking about what they're doing and what they're interested in.
I think, Judge, you did a good segue. So if Melania or Styles wants to go on, this is the time.
All right, cool. So there are many different ways to interpret the images of Black men and women in film. Filmmaking is a universal language that everyone can understand, and it possesses the power to surge a wildfire of emotions. It can help people escape the reality, be educated, find a voice, highlight important issues of our society. As they were talking about, it was exceptionally hard for Blacks to get a voice in film, both behind and in front of the camera. But today, people have finally realized that we are essential in the film world because of our unique and creative voices.
Right. So today I'm just going to give like an outline of what we're going to be talking about. One is going to be the development of Blacks in the horror and thriller genre. Second, the representation of the Black community within films, for instance, the LGBTQ plus community, superheroes, stories, and even appearances. And then lastly, the development of the issues and solutions of Black people within the film industry.
All right, so to the horror. I was a huge fan of horror films when growing up. One of my favorite films of all time is George A. Romero's 1968's Night of the Living Dead. When I was young, I didn't know why it was one of my favorite films until I got older and I realized that it was the first film I ever saw that had Black representation and that I can relate to. One of my pet peeves about the filmmaking process of horror movies is when someone claims that there's no meaning behind it or it's pure entertainment. No, it's so much more. Even if it's twisted and stuff, there has a meaning behind it. And Night of the Living Dead exemplifies this perfectly. On a surface level, this movie is about a group of people who barricade themselves inside a rural farmhouse and attempt to survive the hordes of relentless zombies who can only be killed by a shot in the head. Before this movie, the zombie genre reflected people who were stripped of their identity, mostly slaves and workers. We witnesses aspects in 1943's I Walked with a Zombie and 1932's White Zombie, if you heard of any of those. Night of the Living Dead was the first ever cannibalistic zombie film that not only defined the genre, but also helped African Americans into cinema. This movie showed that Blacks could create just as compelling lead roles as whites. George A. Romero claims that having Dwayne Jones, a Black lead, was not intentional, but he only chose him because he was the best actor for the role. But that's a complete lie. According to film school and his last interview he gave, he purposely wanted all his characters in the movie to represent a political allegory at that time. Having a Black lead during the 1960s who was in charge of making a decision might have been more frightening for white viewers than zombies themselves or a daughter killing her mother in the basement. Personally, that's what I kind of think. This movie was also able to connect audience members with a Black protagonist because everyone wanted this character to survive. Spoiler alert, he did not. Dwayne Jones' character was shot in the head by a white character who then pitchforked him under a pile of bodies and set it on fire. Yes, that's really dark. This was a huge slap to audience members, but it also illustrated the parallels of Blacks getting shot and mistreated by whites during that time. As years went by, the African Americans had less prominent roles in horror films, or we became the stereotype of the first characters to die in a film until 1992's Candyman. This movie changed everything because the Black lead, Tony Todd, was the monster, and he was driven by love and the need to kill. Yes, that's dark, I know. My family thinks I'm crazy when I call Candyman a love story because, well, it is a dark one. Great slasher films always start with a past to explain like the trigger that made the person / monster go off the railings. The screenwriter in this film used the violence of slavery to explain the emergence of this character. In the past, Candyman was a slave who was lynched and had his arm cut off and replaced with a hook by a white man whose daughter Candyman has fallen in love with. Jump to present time, bear with me, Candyman, a murderous soul now, is accidentally summoned to reality by a skeptic grad student researching the monster's myth. The researcher becomes obsessed with the legend of Candyman, who is then stalked by him because the researcher is the reincarnation of his white lover from the past. I don't know how they pitched the idea, but I'm just gonna say that was probably really hard and that's really complicated. I'm not gonna go much farther than that one. Black audiences were impacted because this proved that they wanted to see more African Americans have prominent roles in horror. However, one can argue this film was more intended for white audiences at first. The main location of the movie was Cabrini Green, one of the most dangerous housing projects in America due to gang violence and drug selling that occurred. Many whites feared the urban setting because it showed the sprawl of poverty in our society and what monsters or people might have come out of it. I believe great works of horror come from exercise of extreme empathy, and Candyman built onto this belief. And now Millie's going to talk about a modern day masterpiece of horror. Take it away.
Right. So I wanted to talk about the movie that was actually mentioned. You guys mentioned Get Out 2018 by Jordan Peele. It's personally one of my favorites. The movie is considered a modern day horror masterpiece because of the way it was not only societally, well, it shifted society, but also its incredible tactics and concepts that were used. Now, I'll talk about the premise. The premise is a young Black man goes to visit his white girlfriend and their parents for the weekend. Now, yet he does have a worry that many other Black people do when it comes to interracial relationships, is whether or not the white family will be accepting or not. And when he's actually surprised by their interaction, he kind of gets used to and gets a little comfortable to what the family's kind of quirkiness. But once he realizes what that all is, it's already too late. So I'm actually going to screen share again. There we go. Sorry about that. Here is let's Get Out. Now, the movie really I gravitated to the movie so much because it was one of the first thriller I ever watched. But I'm gonna be honest, it was my last. Me and horror don't really mix. I'm too much of a scaredy cat. But seeing this, the second point why I was so intrigued by it was because all the pointers that were in the movie and the problems that they showed were literally ones that I was seeing in society at the same time. And this was all shown in like the subtle or even blunt details in the film. This also shifts over to what great movies like this does. When it has such a big platform, it starts controversies. But with those controversies, we kind of question ourselves and why are they, controversies in the first place? And that starts off questions. And then those questions give conversations. And that's how, society moves in general. So one of the questions I kind of garnered myself by watching this and others as well was why as society do we move so fast, yet we are still uncomfortable with the idea of interracial relationships. Another is why do these cases, and in the movie there's a scene or, the whole premises of them kidnapping Black people to use them. And that was kind of a problem that we see in society, not, a whole bunch of white people, kidnapping a bunch of Black people, but, why are these cases of Black female and female missing cases going unnoticed? And there's kind of no urgency to do anything about them. And that raised more questions about society and how we need to change that. And then the last one of the questions is something that I relate to, and I do a lot, which is why do we dilute ourselves or even code switch is kind of like the term they use now. But in the film, it's actually used as a tool to make white people more comfortable. And I'm going to be honest, my family does it, I do it. You kind of suppress the Southern twang a little bit for those certain situations. But that's just the kind of world we lived in. But started out. And what's really interesting is about the horror genre is that it has a lot more wiggle room than any other genre to kind of poke fun at, or you just draw attention to problems that they see in society that can be either unspoken or just, goes unnoticed. And one of my favorite concepts that Jordan Peele used in the film was what it's called the sunken place. And that right there is kind of what the main character, what's his name, Chris falls into. And it's a metaphor for not only the literal history of slavery, but also the cultural appropriation that we suffer from, and use of like social niceties and to enforce social hierarchies and keep us oppressed. Which what happens to him is that he gets hypnotized by Rose, his girlfriend, his mother, or her mother, I should say. And his whole kind of soul kind of is suppressed in his own body, so it can be replaced. Showing that yes, Black people are necessary. They needed his body. They needed his physical appearance or physical attributes, but they try to suppress his own, which is again metaphorical, but we see it in society, which is crazy. Another thing I wanted to point out was one of the quirkiest things I've ever seen in film was the performance, the acting performance. And this is Georgina, the character, played by Betty Gabriel. And she did an incredible acting performance. But the thing is with Chris and Georgina, when they first meet, well, actually, I should explain how this came about. When in regular films, there's kind of like timings, they call it beats. And as the audience, we're kind of used to those. But when it comes to film, or when it comes to horror, the genre, they kind of twist it and mangle it and go up and down and all around with it and make you really uncomfortable, or, that's how they get the suspense and the eerie feeling. So they did that, but with a Black character. So what happened was Chris, of course, he's like the only only Black person in this whole white atmosphere, yet he meets Georgina. And so he's kind of expecting like one of those situations where it's kind of like we're in this together moment, but he doesn't get that. And we expect it as the audience as well. And she's really offbeat, and she's, that's what Miss Gabriel did an incredible job with. She knew those timings and then switched it all up on us. And as the audience, we were not expecting, we did not know what to expect really. But I think that's one of the best things. And then Miles, can you take over?
All right. So the horror genre proves that all representation does matter, especially in the African-American community, even if it's like a monster like Candyman or Get Out. Representation is important in all genres, on screen and behind the scenes, and not just in horror. The Black community is not black and white. There are a million different hints of gray. 2021 has made it possible to grow representation because of the youth mindset. For instance, Millie will take back over.
One of my favorite movies is Black Panther for so many reasons. First, it was, the director is the first Black director of a Marvel movie, Ryan Coogler. And on a personal level, this movie, when it came out, was 2018, and I was only 13, and that's actually the year I started film. And personally, I had no concern about social issues. I was, surrounded by diversity. So nothing racial ever hit me directly. And so when I saw this movie for the first time, the only accomplishment I recognized was, yay, another Black character, or another character being added to the MCU, which I was already a fan of. But then I noticed that everyone I was surrounded by saw it differently. They saw that it was the first Black superhero to have its own movie, the first Black cast, full Black cast, lead class, I should say, for a superhero film, and also the first Black director of a superhero film. These were all accomplishments that were new, and this is 2018. So for me, it was eye-opening. I didn't know that these things were just now happening. And it didn't seem to me like we were just now making progress, but instead it was more like all of this progress that we've made is now paying off. And that right there just made me super motivated and inspired to, in the film industry in general. Some of the examples of how this movie was so awesome where although it was fictional, it did such a proper way of showing diversity of the Black community, and diversity and representation. Like for one, the languages that they used were Swahili and Xhosa, which is an African dialect, which is really hard to learn. I have family who speaks Swahili. So when I watched this movie and I recognized it, I was so blown away by it. Also, Africa in general was shown in a different light, you know, instead of them using kind of, you know, doing that spin-off of superhero coming from a poor industry or poor surrounding and then coming up and turning into a superhero. These were royalty people. These were people from, you know, royal backgrounds shown as incredible, strong people. And also something really, really small, which I have a picture of. I can pull up here. Here we go. Which is something that impacted me as a, you know, a Black girl, is hairstyles. And they had an array of them, from going from Bantu knots to braids. These were all things that are kind of missing and unfortunately considered rare on film and on TV to show. But now we're making progress, and it's there now. Another film that is incredible with representation is Hidden Figures. And it's about a group of Black women who are in STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, who work at NASA. And this movie really showcased hope for the advancement of the Black community, especially, you know, women in STEM programs. It did that all by being in a setting that was partially segregated in the 1960s era. And for me, my favorite subject in school was always math. And my uncle is, well, I call him my uncle, but it's my second cousin, who is Ronald E. McNair, who passed away in the Challenger. So I already had, like, you know, familial background with astronomy. And I was super excited when this movie came out. I was, you know, really young. And I saw these women here. There we go. And when I saw this, I was, you know, blown away. I wanted to become, like, you know, the next, there we go, right here. The woman in the middle, Katherine Johnson, is the main character, but played by Taraji P. Henson. And I was super inspired by her.
All right, I'm gonna talk about Moonlight. So 2017's award-winning film Moonlight was a huge success for representing the Black LGBTQ+ community. This story follows a young Black man coming to grips with his homosexual feelings. It was the first film ever with an entirely African-American cast, and the first film with a homosexual main character to win a top Oscar. Barry Jenkins made this film because he said it was a story that needed to be told about a Black gay kid coming of age, and very few people emerge from this background or community that they used to live in and become successful enough to tell that type of story. It was the playwright and his truth. One area I feel that hasn't been fully represented, since we're on representation, is the Black trans community. You have amazing actors and actresses like Laverne Cox and Brian Michael Smith who want roles highlighting this reality, and it should. Now to go to, like, issues where we think need to be solved or it's slowly being solved is, I'm just gonna read it from here. So our generation can be very confusing, as you know. First, we want representation, but then we say we don't want to be overrepresented, falsely represented, or represented in a certain light. Hollywood has developed a checklist over the years. I'm not sure if you guys have noticed it, for what they will claim to be a critical or financial success. This checklist includes casting a Black character, an LGBTQ+ character, a disabled character, or a strong female protagonist. Most of the time, the producers or directors try to find one character who represents multiple communities, casting or creating a strong Black female LGBTQ+ character, which rarely makes the best movie. Storytelling should not involve a checklist to me. If a character is not needed to advance that story, why are they even there? If you want to create a story that involves a Black or LGBTQ+ character, then find that story. And before writing that story, make sure you're fully educated on that topic, because that's how you get some people saying the Black community is this way, and it's really not. Write what you know, unless you create you'll create characters that falsely represent that community. We need to find and bring in more Black screenwriters and actors and cinematographers and directors, in my opinion, to write these stories and tell different stories that bring up some tell these different kind of stories. Another current issue that is being solved, but slowly, I think they need to improve on it faster within the film community, is casting different shades of Black skin tones actors. Historically, the only way for an African American to be casted on a mainstream role was if they were a Hollywood brown color. Hollywood brown to me is when a Black actor, screenwriter, or director, that's my bird in the background, who appear to be white. This characterization has a positive and negative side on the Black community. To clarify, actors with lighter skin tones made it possible for actors with darker skin tones like Samuel L. Jackson and Viola Davis to have a chance in Hollywood and to be successful. However, Hollywood has become accustomed to looking for lighter skin actors for current roles, and Millie has some other stuff.
Right. So, us as the Black community, we're kind of accustomed to seeing, like how Miles said, certain type of characters, really. And some that I wanted to focus on is side characters, stereotypes, false depictions. But really, when we talk about side characters, it's actually a great example that is prevalent. It comes from, and when we talk about side characters, it can come from like a sidekick or a best friend. And we're used to seeing that as the Black role, or, the Black best friend to the white man. And one example that actually happens twice is in the MCU. And as I mentioned before about Black Panther, that was like the first Black superhero on film. He was the one to only get his own movie. But in the whole MCU, there's actually Don Cheadle's character, War Machine, and then Anthony Mackie's character, Falcon, which both Cheadle and Mackie do an excellent job on portraying those characters, because I love them the best. But they both are best friends or sidekicks to Iron Man and Captain America, which is crazy, but it's there, and I can't wait to see how we change that and we morph that. And we've done that with Black Panther. But even in that one series of movies, they're changing it now. Even with Falcon, they made a series now, which is Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and they're carrying him on to being the spotlight character. So to kind of finalize what we've been saying, I know all this information kind of, for me, it was heavy writing about it, constantly bringing up our, Black struggles, or almost complaining about what we've been seeing and how it's, the process is slowing down, or is slow. But, it's not really that. It's kind of just acknowledging the bumps in the road to a more better future for us, and a hopeful one. As a community, I feel like this is what we're experiencing as growing pains, and will genuinely make, what's it called, progression in film.
All right, I think that's all we have.
This is Linda Crump, and first I want to thank everyone. We do have probably more questions, believe it or not, in our queue than we might have time for today. So I'm going to take a few of them, and we'll see where we go with them, and anyone can answer them. It doesn't have to be just one person. There's a question about what inspires you all to continue to participate in filmmaking and storytelling? What do you envision for the future of film in light of the pandemic and the new platform of film outside of Hollywood, like Netflix, Amazon, and other streaming services? The only thing I want to add to this question is, I recall the experience of being in a theater with other moviegoers and feeling their reaction to a film. And during the pandemic, I haven't been able to do that at all. So just tell us a little bit about your experience, and as you continue to participate, what do you think the future is going to be?
Let me go ahead and start, and then I'll turn it over. First of all, I think the Zoom platform and the Netflix platform are basically going to be here to stay and are probably the dominant industry right now. And I know it has caused some issues in terms of some of the major studios, but the other question, as it deals with why I'm particularly passionate about these stories, is because I think as Black people, we have to tell our own story. And I think it's very important, especially to encourage young filmmakers like Melania and Stiles, that we need the next generation to tell a more complex story than has been told so far. So Paul, you may want to add to that.
Yeah, I'll just add a little, and then I definitely want to hear from Styles and Melania. But we rushed through 100 years of history of Black people in film and the film industry, from where we were portrayed as less than human to where now we actually make our own $100 million film where we are the superhero. And I think the ability to tell our own story is critical to where we go, not just in film industry, but as human, as individuals in this society. One way to counteract all of the other BS that's going on with us from Minnesota to Georgia is to start telling our own story that talks about and helps inspire and motivate us to stand up, continue to speak out, and louder and even more frequently. And the ability to tell our own story that reaches millions of people is critical. So I look forward to, my 50 years of being a fan of film, kind of looking to see where Melania and Styles now take us. So whether it's Netflix, Zoom, or the next whatever it is after this point.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll go. Definitely when you talk about Zoom, that's quite essential nowadays. Even when I'm in film class, we are all, my teacher screen shares, and that's how we watch the films together. Yeah, of course, the feeling isn't the same. You don't get the oohs and ahs anymore, but that kind of still experience in a way is there, but when it comes to what we're watching in general. But this, I'm motivated, definitely, in participating. Although, like right now, we're working on The Last Rung on the Ladder, Styles and I. But I haven't gone on set at all. I'm working all from home from this desk right here, and it keeps me going. But it's really fun, and personally, I'm really excited about when we do have the chance to all be together in a more comfortable setting. We're gonna want to work even harder because we've been so limited nowadays.
I'm gonna,
Personally,
go ahead.
I was gonna say personally for me, I think movie theaters are definitely gonna come back because it's gonna take that one movie, which is most likely gonna be either a most likely Marvel movie that's gonna draw audience back in, and they're probably gonna be like, it's not going to Disney Plus, it's going straight to theaters, and no one can change that. And I think that will help reset the movie. People going back to the movie theater.
Okay, I'm going to ask one other question because it's already 58. Believe it or not, it's been fascinating listening to what everybody had to say, but this is the last question we're going to ask. You know what? Let's not ask it. Let's see if there's any closing comments that any of you would like to make, since we only have 2 minutes left. Start with you, Styles.
I would like to say thank you for the opportunity. I learned a lot about film history, more than I thought. One thing that I would like to say is, what I wanted to add to Paul and Judge Williams' presentation was Birth of the Nation. It is still relevant in film school. Me and Millie have personally watched clips from that movie, and we're still in high school. And the reason why is because it's claimed to be one of the best editing techniques in film. And I don't understand why. It's a mandatory requirement for film school, so we have to watch a film. So when I go off to film school, my teacher's like, you're gonna have to watch the whole 3-hour film, and I'm like, I really don't want to watch it, but it's still there pretty much.
Before Melania talks, I have one more question, and that's the big elephant in the room. Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry has his own studio. He directs, he produces, he gets his own financing. Is that the future of Blacks in films, or is that the antithesis of Black filmmaking? Or what is your response to my observation?
Hey, Gene, I'm going to ask Styles to talk about a little bit about his opinion of Tyler Perry, because
Opposite.
I might get in trouble if I say it, but I'm going to have Styles give you his opinion.
All right. So Tyler Perry, I have respect for the guy. He helped bring in Taraji P. Henson, all those talented Black actresses, and gave them a spotlight and helped them gain more roles and mainstream roles. However, personally for me, Tyler Perry, I feel like can do a little bit better with Black representation and not feed in too much with Black stereotypes. I understand why he did it at first, was to build that mainstream audience. But now I feel like he owns a studio company and stuff like that, and he can help build more and tell more creative stories that don't paint like the Medea or the angry Black woman stereotype. Personally, for me, I was really close with my mom, and Black women, they have a reason to be angry. They don't need to be painted just not to be angry. And Tyler Perry kind of made it seem like, oh, Black women are angry all the time with some of his films, like Acrimony that recently came out. You have Diary of a Mad Black Woman, and I'm sitting here like they have a reason to. So, but I would love to work on I believe Tyler Perry is giving the youth a chance in Hollywood, and he's helping elevate their kind of work. But for him, I kind of wish he will write more creative stories and produce more that's Oscar worthy material, or like give the youth like from different backgrounds more of a chance that don't just play into what he's used to doing. Millie has her own opinion on it too, I believe.
Well, it's actually really funny because when we were writing kind of like a pre-transcript together, we were like, we should take out the Tyler Perry part, shouldn't we? But you know, going off of what Miles said, we definitely, I respect him completely. And like he said, again, he's put a huge spotlight on Black talent in general over many, many years. And it is unfortunate. And actually, I should mention that the family I'm closest to is my mother's maternal side, and we're all girls. It's, you know, all aunties, all female cousins. And, you know, when we see movies like this, we're not, you know, like, hey, we don't act like that. But we do exactly what the movie wants us to do. We laugh at it, you know, it's hilarious. But, you know, it's when those movies and those films become the only thing that are in people who are not of color. And that's all that's in their diet. They only know movies like that, and they only see us in that light of being, you know, again, all the stereotypes that we've mentioned before. And I actually experienced that. I was with a friend of mine, and she was watching, I can't remember something in Norbit, I believe. And I think Martin was in the movie. But again, it was, you know, it was really funny. But of course, I had a bunch of stereotypes of the Black community in it. And she's like, you guys, this is really fun. You guys all do that? Is that how your grandmother acts? And I was like, no, not at all. And it's really unfortunate. But I do think that when we kind of are experimenting with our own filmmaking right now, and, you know, because of how new film is compared to all the art forms. And we have so much progression to do.
Yeah, I like what Melania said. I think she hit the, you know, the nail on the head that we're all experimenting. I remember when the Black exploitation movies hit the street and people complained about it glorifying drug pushers and pimps and those who pimps work for. So, but that lasted and it ended, and we went on to a different, newer day in filmmaking. Now, Tyler Perry's also produced and made other film that did not include Medea, and a lot of jobs he provided for people as well in the film industry. So he's got to be given credit for that piece as well, and spurring other directors, producers, and other people to get in the business. So, you know, it makes it like what Melania says, you know, if that is all you judge us by our Tyler Perry movies, then we have a problem. But we have an obligation to make sure the rest of our movies get seen by the rest of the world. So I like what Melania said. So.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, now just my last words, you know, Gene, you know, after Linda said what would be our last words, I look forward to seeing more from Melania and Styles. You know, my 50 years are over. I'm looking forward to where they take us.
Thank you, Judge.
Yeah, if I can get one last word in, and that is you have to support people like Melania and Styles and support Black film. And we're very proud that we do have a Black Film Festival here in Sarasota, the Visions of the Black Experience. And it's a collaboration with New College and the Boxer Diversity Initiative and ASALA. And so we're looking forward to having it later this fall. And I invite all of you to attend and support Black cinema. Thanks.
Thank you, Melania.
Thank you so
Any-
much, guys.
Thank you, Stiles.
Thank you.
I hope we've all been enlightened, and I believe we have. I think it was a worthwhile hour, and our next Beyond Black History Month is going to be May 20th. It's about the contributions of the Black veterans to our society, our world, and what we have done with it. And with that, I'll turn it back over to David. You can close up, or you can keep it open for people who want to stay and chat a while.
I'm gonna keep it open for those who want to stay, but let me thank Jean and Linda for what we hope to accomplish in Beyond Black History Month, and I couldn't be prouder of our team who put this together, and for everybody, for Judge Williams and for Paul and Melania and Stiles. I just thank you. So good night to those who have to leave, but if others, as Linda said, we've got a number of questions in the chat. I've saved the chat, and if we don't get them answered, we'll send them off to Paul and Charles, and they can ponder them. But I'll stop the recording now so we can just visit for a few minutes.
You said that you're going to stop